Namaste. Good morning, everyone. And thank you for joining in wherever you are. So it's a happy now. Some of you might be on the other side of the world. You know, we've got some people in America and Europe joining in, and of course, Australia. So thank you for being here. I would really like to invite us, first of all, to take some moments to really pause and center into ourselves so that we can come into a space that is open and supported by conscious awareness. So let's start with 3 deep, full breaths in through the nose and out through the mouth. And you might like to close your eyes as you do. Really connect with your breath and allow the breath to support you, to work with you as you breathe in, opening and opening. And as you breathe out, surrendering, emptying out, just really allowing yourself to surrender to this moment and to open deeply to awareness. Again, breathing in, opening and opening with awareness, with conscious presence. And so as you breathe out, letting go into this, surrendering deep into this moment, into the spaciousness of this pure aware self that is just here to be open, receptive, listen, observe. And again, breathing in, opening and opening. And as you breathe out, really allowing yourself to fully arrive, centered, deep within. So take your awareness now, deep into your innermost being. You're allowing yourself to breathe deeper and deeper, each breath carrying you into the source that is within you, this deep essence of beingness that is beyond and behind your thoughts, your experiences, the events of life, behind all that is transient, coming and going. There's this constancy of just pure presence. As you take a deep breath into this now, really feel yourself centering deep within. And gently affirm to yourself, I am here. Breathe in deeply as you welcome this presence. And in doing so, we're welcoming the love, the wisdom, the guidance, the clarity, the strength, the peace, the truth, all that we need to be in right alignment within ourselves and with each other. And that here now, we open ourselves to this awareness. And whatever it is we need to see, hear, feel, experience, whatever is relevant for you. And anything else, whatever does not resonate, we can bless that as well, that we let it pass on its way. And however it is to serve, perhaps for someone else or another moment, we release it with acknowledgement and gratitude. And in this way, we allow ourselves to be open to what is here to serve us. With this, take a deep breath into your heart center. Really welcoming the love of the universe, creation and life, breathing it into your heart and feeling it here in your heart. However that is represented, however that is felt and experienced, take some moments to acknowledge that now. As you acknowledge this now, breathe in with gratitude, taking some moments to give thanks. Thanks for being able to open to loving awareness, to open ourselves to grow, to reach into places that we might not have been able to, as we are supported with conscious, loving presence. With this gratitude, breathing deeply into your body, feeling yourself centered, anchored. Again, affirm to yourself, I am here. Feel the truth of this, that no matter what is happening, you are here. You are in the ground of beingness. As you breathe with the love and the gratitude now, feel it flowing through your body, cell to cell, and radiating through your aura and vibrating in harmony with all existence. And as you feel this and breathe with this, take another deep breath into your body, feeling yourself here, grounded, open, aware, and receptive. And as you breathe deeply, gently wiggle your toes, your fingers, stretch, and slowly open your eyes. So welcome, everyone. Just a few little things before I do begin, and as a reminder that some of you may come in and out of the talk depending on what's happening. Hopefully we will be able to provide you a recording post-event so that you can sit back and listen and reflect further in your own time. Also, we may be joined by people throughout this session. And so I really want to remind everyone that there's this whole context here. So it's important to take all of that in rather than just focusing on one thing or the other. And of course, possibly if you do miss some of it. So it always helps to open ourselves as much as possible to all context. And that's really what motivated me to be here and share with you all. Of course, all of you are aware of this recent event involving the Dalai Lama, and that it has triggered off a tsunami of different reactions and perceptions. And I'm going to remind everyone again that I'm not here to suggest that I am an expert by any means, or I'm the judge or the jury or anything like that, but rather to encourage us to open our awareness, our hearts, our minds, our eyes, our ears, and to really watch this particular event as an example that demonstrates to us how fragile we really are. That no one of us is perfect. No one of us knows everything. We are dealing with the shadow in ourselves and the world around us. And in order for us to navigate that, it's going to really help if we can cultivate a connection with a place inside of us and with others and people around us that is less biased and willing to be open enough, with enough curiosity to say, well, let me really look at all the pieces of this picture, or all of the sides of this story, or all of the possible hidden factors in any situation. And that can be very difficult when we live in a world where we're driven by speed and immediacy and sound bites. So we're being fed narratives and media content that is dramatically edited down to focus very specifically on key snippets within certain events, and even at times deliberately provokes or evokes a singular point of perception. So before I also discuss some further layers to my own observations around that particular event, I just want to share, some of you are aware, and maybe not all of you are aware, in my own life, I have experienced child sexual abuse, sexual violation. I was nearly murdered. I have encountered firsthand some very shocking situations and experiences. And like I say, as a child and through into young adulthood. From the background of that experience is where I speak of my own emotional or conscious context, and I take full ownership for that. It is mine. I also take full ownership for and acknowledge that I am by far from a perfect human being. And I would like to suggest that that's probably true for every single one of us. We're not perfect. I'm very aware of my own journey with the shadow within myself and within others during my life. I have gone through multiple experiences that profoundly humble me and awaken me to incredible compassion and insight and comprehension of things beyond perhaps the usual way of being able to see and interpret certain actions. And all of that combined is why I can sit here in a space of great peace and unstickiness and comfort in myself and my life, that I have been able to incorporate all of those experiences and I am at peace with it. I'm not in a state of scarring and, unresolved trauma. And I feel incredibly blessed as a result of that. That does not mean that I'm disconnected from the reality and the gravity of the shadow. It does not mean that I make excuses for the events or the actions around shadow. What it does mean is that in my own life and experience, I have been able to take charge of my experience. I am in the center of my being. I am in the power of how I receive all the signals of life, how I interpret them, how I respond to them. I feel greatly empowered and blessed by my life. So I can equally acknowledge the wrongdoings and the violations as I can underlying causes, as I can misinterpretations and the possibility of how easily we can be confused, how easily we can overlook actions that can be violating because of our ignorance, as equally as we can overjudge or misjudge because of our own conditioning. And I think this is a really key point for us to consider, and what really motivated me to share with you all is, irrespective of guilt or innocence within any of these events, what we're dealing with is the shadow. And there is shadow within victim and perpetrator. As humans, when we have experienced violation, most often those traumas are left unresolved and they form foundations in our psyche. And so we're all walking around, whether with trauma or positive experiences, we're all walking around with this framework of built up interpretations of ourselves and our world and what it means, what's okay and what's not okay. We're all walking around with that. And we all know that as a result of it, there are so many occasions where we have misunderstandings because each of us is walking around with our own framework, and we're watching, we're observing, interpreting, feeling and experiencing through it, and we can completely misunderstand another person as a result of it. We can also ignorantly, with a lack of consideration of those differences, impose our own behaviors on others that can be completely inappropriate. And we can do that without even meaning to. So what I'm really highlighting here is that there is no black or white in any situation. Can we say in instances, absolutely, there can be sexual violation, and we can say 100% that is sexual violation. Do we know all of the causes around it? Not necessarily. So there are some situations where there are absolutes. If someone were to come and punch me in the face right now, you would all look with absolute horror. I would reel with the physical impact, and we could all state with absolute certainty that was a violent force. But what if you weren't able to see behind the screen, and you weren't able to hear what was happening, and you didn't see that a man was chasing another man, and he pushed that man, and the man had his fist up because he was ready to protect himself. But because of the force of him being tipped, he came and bang, and he hit me in the face. And what if that was the only thing you saw? How sure can you be then of your interpretation if what you see is only a snippet? So I'm just posing questions for us all. How sure can we be of anything when we're viewing or observing from within a small lens, from within edited information, snippets and sound bites of information? How sure can we be of anything when we're not present to witness, to experience firsthand the entire event? How can we be sure, even when we do witness the entire event, of the ongoing behaviors and actions outside of that event? We really don't know. So my key point here is that the internet has blown up with this particular situation involving the Dalai Lama and a young boy, and it is completely and utterly polarized, and it is completely and utterly driven by absolutism, by pretty well, nearly everyone's opinion that their interpretation is right. Whether it is defending and protecting the Dalai Lama, that, you know, it's innocent, that it is behind his cultural context. I reflected on some of that because it's a valid part of the picture of his character and the circumstances. That the boy was interviewed after that event and he spoke very comfortably and positively. You know, there are all these pieces on that side, and then there's the pieces on the side of absolute certainty that it is predatory, that it is perverted, that the Dalai Lama, you know, is a man. Absolutely, of course, he's a man. And I will say that when I first watched that footage myself, my reaction was, whoa, I was completely shocked. My first reaction. But what happened was I went, well, hang on a moment. Because I make it my commitment to walk my talk. I have deliberately trained myself through my life to maintain that center, the alignment of connection with consciousness, to maintain that spatial awareness, that drops into the pause and waits to consider an entire situation, that opens myself to say, wait on a moment, maybe I don't know everything. Maybe I don't see all sides of what's happening here. So I took pause. I reminded myself, okay, we all don't know everything going on here. All of us on the internet, right? We weren't there. We're not the family, we're not the boy, we're not the Dalai Lama, etc. So I waited, and more information came, and I investigated, and I found the whole video, and I found the follow-up interviews, and I found all sorts of information. On top of that, some of you might be aware, I spent personal one-on-one time with the Dalai Lama. I was part of that Buddhist fraternity in my young adult years of development. I underwent a very deep passage of mystical practice. And I observed his character and nature firsthand. I got to interact with that. Is he childlike and playful? Yes, he is. Is he cheeky? Yes, he is. Is he affectionate? Does he kiss a man on the lips even? Yes, he does. Does he behave in ways that were, made obvious by the internet of different things circulating? Yes. Can I say 100% I know that man? Absolutely not. How am I to know? Maybe somewhere along the line and behind more closed doors, he is a pervert or, predatory. I cannot say 100%. Can I speak from my own direct experience of qualities that I do see as innocent, as reflective of a man, an adult, who is so in himself, so comfortable and seated in the notion of himself being a grandfather-like figure for everyone, representing compassion and kindness, and that he is childlike and playful? Absolutely, yes, I've observed that. But is any one single human 100% anything? No. And this is why in one of my comments with the little video response I put out, I did say, maybe we will never reach a unified, clear answer on this. And some people would say that only God knows the truth behind these actions and behaviors, the truth of what is the energy behind it. But I think that's really important in situations like this that we consider. There is a whole space in our human social construct that is grey. As much as we want to fit everything into a box of black and white, and that we all agree on what's black and what's white, that's not the reality of ourself and our human nature. There's just so much in between. There's so much diversity and nuance to who we are, to how we believe, to our customs, to the energy and intention behind our actions. Can any one of us say that every single adult who has ever kissed a child on the lips has had a sexual intention or predatory behavior behind them? No, we can't say that. We know that there are so many innocent adults who have kissed a child on the lips or who have demonstrated a cultural behavior that it is just purely coming from that. Again, can we say because of that, in this case, this person is 100% innocent? How can we? Can we say there's a high chance he is innocent? We could also. Maybe yes, maybe no. Again, you'll notice I'm making a strong point here. we really need to be open to all possibilities. We really need to acknowledge the nuances, that we cannot paint everything with the same brush. Why then are we doing it? Because look at the behavior on the internet, and that's exactly what we're seeing. We're seeing we've got the brush which says guilty and the brush which says innocent. And we're at risk here of losing some of the implications of this. One being, there have been many occasions where innocent people have been jailed because sound bites and snippets of information have been skewed in a way that makes that person look guilty. And some people have been incarcerated for their life, to only then be freed on the basis of further information and facts that prove innocence. We also have on the opposite side of the camp, where people who have what seems to be a squeaky clean record and character are suddenly exposed as being horrendous violators. So if we don't make space to consider the possibility that our view might be wrong, we shut down the information. And this is why I referred to, in the headline of this talk, the shadow as being two-faced. Because we're all really wanting to deal with the shadow. Why? Because we've all experienced it in some form, we all have it in some form, and many, many people have unresolved traumas as a result of it. So we know, and by the way, I'm just going to make sure you're all on the same page here. I do not profess at all to be an expert. I am not a psychologist, etc. I'm just speaking from my own realm of experience and observations. And I've got a strong passion for learning. So I've done a lot of learning from experts as well. And from what I understand, psychologically speaking, when we're dealing with the shadow and the way our brain works, even if we're not dealing with the shadow, the way our brain works is, it is a search mechanism. It wants to validate its internal framework. And this is one of the strongest motivators of us as humans. We want to be right. Sadly, oftentimes we want to be right over and above being love, over and above finding understanding and unity and compassion. We just want to be right. And why is that so acute now in our society? This absolutism, outrage, offense at the trigger of just a hair trigger. Why? Because of the layers and layers of unresolved traumas. When we have unresolved traumas, that proclivity to be right and to assert an affirmation of what is already internally our interpretation, that proclivity is increased when we have unresolved traumas, because we're wanting to protect the traumas and we're wanting to rectify the traumas. So if we have not felt resolved with our own traumas, we're going to want to see it resolved out there. We're going to point our finger lickety-split at anyone who looks even vaguely like a perpetrator. We're going to jump immediately to accuse them of a horrendous act or crime because we feel we have not been vindicated. somewhere in ourself, that someone has to be made right. Someone else must be made accountable. And so there we can be pointing out the shadow in someone else, calling it out, and believing we're making the right accusation that there is a predator, when actually it's our own shadow that is also taking part in that event. And this is why events like this remind us that we're in a time of incredible complexity. Things are not easy because we don't live in a time where we had manageable sized tribes and social governance had robust moral boundaries, and we were all in the same camp. Now we have centralized government, we have mass civilization social hubs where we don't even know our neighbor. And so unconsciously, most humans are walking around with mistrust. We've lost the footings of trust in ourselves and in our social construct. So it's almost impossible for us to trust, really inherently trust anyone or anything 100%, because we no longer have the construct that supports and validates the grounds on which we can trust. When we had manageable sized tribes and robust moral boundaries that we all agreed on, it was pretty easy to keep everyone, in right alignment. Now we have this clash and intersection of cultures around the world, the merging, the homogenizing, the belief and assertion of my beliefs are right and yours are wrong, and my rights are important and equal as yours. And at the same time, ironically, because I'm standing up for my rights, I'm actually wiping out yours. We're dealing with a great big mess. So where does that leave us? One thing it tells us is we actually can't really answer it at large scale or for anyone else. We can only answer it for ourselves and in our own field of influence. So the question is, am I aware of my shadow? Am I aware of my bias? Am I willing to look at how two-faced I can be in my shadow? Why am I so intent on insisting absolutely an interpretation or judgment on another, based on a snippet of information? What's driving that? Where does it come from in me? What is there left in me that wants validation, that wants to be rectified, healed, resolved, vindicated? What is it in me that I need to give my forgiveness to, my peace, my understanding and compassion to? So this opens the way to a lot of inquiries rather than definitions, rather than us arriving at absolute assessment or judgment or interpretation. So on that note, I'd like to really open the way for us all now to share in some inquiry. I really want to encourage you, if you have something around this that you'd like to voice and process and bring inquiry into, please raise your hand. So Saisha, let's open the way so that we can get moving with some Q&A here, because I think this could be a very interesting forum.
Yes, thank you very much, Isira, and thank you also for what you've shared. So there's a couple of ways that you can ask a question. You will find a little icon for a hand. I think it's on your screen. If you just scroll down the bottom, you should see that. You can click that and then that cues you into, I can see that you've got your hand up in that way. Or you can type a question into the chat box and I can read that out for you. So, yes, I can't see anyone with their hand up at the moment, Isira, but I am curious. You were talking about the victim perpetrator and the shadow in both. And I guess what I've observed myself is how quickly it flips, like can sit in victim and then all of a sudden be the perpetrator. So maybe can you speak a bit more about that? Because I think that also is something that if you're just flipping the whole time, then finding that space, I think, is what is helpful. So.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you, Saisha. And I think you've actually just made a beautiful point there, which is, well, first of all, yes, it does flip. You know, if we're really honest with ourselves, and I guess that's what I'm here to encourage and invite us all, is to say, let us be as honest as we can be with ourselves, and not just sit at the surface level of what we're thinking and interpreting and why we're thinking and interpreting it, but be willing to dig a little deeper and hang on, step back and look at ourselves and go, well, hang on, what am I actually looking at? How is that information constructed and delivered to me? And how much of it do I see and know and understand? And, well, hang on a minute, why am I responding the way I am? And I also do want to say, by the way, that I have in great care and compassion for the people who are feeling very triggered, in particular by this event, and that absolutely we must protect our children. I understand that the outrage and, you know, the strength of voice, which is accusing on the side of guilt, is because there is a very, very deep care and concern for innocence, for our children, and to protect against violation. I completely appreciate that, especially as someone who has experienced child sexual abuse. I really get it. I want children to be protected as much as everyone else. So what we're looking at now, though, is situations and circumstances where it's not necessarily 100% clear, and that we need to be honest about that. And once we're honest with that, we then look at, well, what's driving or behind it, and then we come to the archetypes of perpetrator and victim, that we can see the behavior or the person can potentially have been violating, and there was a person who was being violated. And then we look at in ourselves how we've experienced that, or how we are reacting to observing that. And what we will see is exactly what you said, Saisha, throughout our life, that we all shift repeatedly from being a perpetrator to being a victim. And even in subtle regards, I'm not suggesting everyone's, you know, gone about abhorrent acts at all. I'm just saying, you know, we've all maybe got angry in a moment and said something really nasty and hurtful to someone. That's perpetrating, that's a violating act. And then that person has been hurt by it. And then you've had moments where someone said or done something hurtful to you. So we've all ricocheted in and out of the direct experience of that. And we've also all participated in taking sides. Think about family units. How many times do you see? Saisha, can you just spotlight again? You know, there's this whole taking side. And again, if we're really, really honest, we'll see that we can easily shift into being a perpetrator again, as in attacking another person, even if they're innocent. And maybe our attack is ignorant, and, you know, we don't realize it's ignorant, and we really believe our interpretation or perception is accurate and true, all the same, it is still hurtful. Think about, some of you might know of the case of Lindy Chamberlain. A dingo's got my baby. This was a very famous case in Australia where a family lost their baby in the middle of the night when they were camping in Central Australia. And it was determined by snippets of information and facts and an absolute insistent interpretation that the mother herself was guilty. She was jailed and imprisoned, and she was released, I can't remember how many years later, 20, 30 years later, on newly found evidence. It wasn't new, it was dug out of the archives and reinvestigated, but it was proven she was innocent. That woman lost her entire life. Yet how many people sat back and joined the camp of accusation and guilt by way of media influence, by way of sound bites of information? And I can guarantee you that during that passage, every person who took the side of saying guilty was absolutely certain they were right. So if we acknowledge we have this shifting going on in us, perpetrator, victim, accuser, defender, etc., and we see that that's just going on. And why does a person perpetrate? Because somewhere along the line, they were a victim. We can trace it all back to a state of wounding, a division, a disconnect. We cannot violate another when we are whole and connected in ourselves. It's impossible. So it points exactly to what you were saying, that what we need then is the pause, the space, the spaciousness in ourselves, where we allow enough stillness and slowing down, first of all, to actually unplug ourselves from all of the data, all of the input, all of the information. Actually unplug yourself as best as you can. Just go, right, switch that off. Try to sweep aside all of the already determined information. Just go into a pause. Come into awareness. Come into stillness. Connect with love. Connect with presence. Connect with consciousness. Sit and wait in there until you feel calm and still and neutral. And when you feel calm and still and neutral, then try opening your eyes again and look and ask more questions. Cultivate some curiosity instead of the notion that the very first thing you see is real or reality or is the whole story. Cultivate curiosity. Be willing to walk around the entire circle, 360 degrees. Don't just stop at the first degree. Be willing to walk around it. And again, if you find yourself being triggered and you find yourself getting, really heightened, impassioned, go back into the pause, come back into the spaciousness, the stillness. Take that time again until you feel calm and neutral again. Now, this might sound strange in a way because we say, well, what if I've been violated? Surely I shouldn't be neutral then. And I'm going to speak from my own direct experience. I was nearly murdered. In that event, because of the power of consciousness, some would say that's rather fantastical or magical or, beyond capacity. But this is what happened. Because I had cultivated that power of connection and consciousness, the neutrality, pure presence, I was in a totally different space and dimensional state of awareness, and I saw into that soul. I saw that where the violation was coming from was he was completely and utterly broken from love, and that it was that brokenness that was so desperate, that was so hurt and angry, it wanted to kill rather than be denied what he thought was love. That awoke in me a love that was infinite. And I prayed for that man, and that man had an awakening. The murderer became the savior. And so that whole event was transformed because of the power of that presence. Post-event, there were two parts playing. One, the awareness of the underlying root cause of that man's violation and this unconditional love for his soul. And so I was beyond being a victim and, you know, like I was even beyond forgiveness. So I had all of that experience, the universal infinite love. I also saw at the human level that man has violated and will and must undergo a passage of accountability for his actions. We might call that his own karmic recourse, right? So I knew that until he had integrated that, he was still a risk to other women. And therefore, he had to face the consequences of his actions. So please do not for a moment think that when I speak about this universal power of awareness that we all have, we have that ability to see things from beyond and understand both sides, that I'm condoning violating actions. I am not. I'm saying that until we can reach that place that has consciousness, stillness, neutrality, and the ability to see deeper underlying causes, we're not going to find true forgiveness, healing, or peace, and the cycle of perpetrator-victim is going to continue. Likewise, we're not going to have the right foundation on which we can honestly and consciously reflect on events like the Dalai Lama from a place that can accommodate the nuances instead of boxed, fixed, absolute interpretations. And until we are willing to do that as a society, as long as we keep using these platforms that distill information down and distort information so that it deliberately skews or points the mind in a certain direction and polarizes, as long as we're working with systems like that, we're not going to arrive at a place of equanimity, equal ground of understanding, moral framework, growth, where we can really make headway on this whole issue of how much violation is happening in the world. So where does that point us back to? Ourself. It points us back to how imperative it is that we are honest with ourselves, and that even if we have experienced horrendous violation in our life, of course, we cannot condone that action. However, we cannot undo what has happened. All we can do is resume a position of empowerment in ourselves and be responsible for that in ourselves to find the way of healing and resolution for ourselves. Likewise, if we've been guilty, to find recourse, accountability in ourselves, to learn, to rise above our transgressions, to forgive ourselves, to have compassion for each other, that we are human. We are flawed, we're imperfect, we all have a shadow, two-faced shadow as well. And if we can stand together in the ground of consciousness and the willingness to open our heart with awareness and reflection, maybe we'll come to a place of greater insight And maybe that will guide us to truth and peace and healing. That's my hope. That's my intention of sharing with you all. So, Seisha, are there any more questions?
Yes, thank you, Isira, also for the clarity you're speaking about this with. There's a comment here from Scott, who's on the webinar. He says, great appreciation for how you laid this out, and that ultimately we each need to align with our true nature, and from there to not be so easily manipulated into separation from each other. Our reaction always brings more of the same experience to us. When we condemn another, we can't help but condemn ourselves. It'll be a nice little summary of what you've just been sharing.
Beautifully, beautifully said, Scott. Thank you so much, and great appreciation for you that you hold that awareness and you're, deepening on that awareness in yourself and your life. Thank you.
And then there's two more. So this first one was a comment put into Facebook Live. Just says trauma becomes a reference point to which we return. And I guess, like, you have touched on that as well, about your own trauma and how you managed to get beyond that. So maybe just, it's more a comment, but maybe do you want to make comment on that?
As we come back to the reference of the trauma, or
yeah, that's right. Trauma becomes a reference point to which we return. Yeah.
Yes, yeah. And the reason it becomes a reference point to which the human does return is because it holds a stronger charge of emotion. And we're actually emotional beings, first and foremost, before we formulate thoughts and interpretations and story. It's the emotional content that really frames our experience. So until we're able to reconcile with that emotion and make sense of it and give it meaning and value, then we keep returning to it. So for me, in my own event of what we would call a trauma, the meaning arrived miraculously within the event. I saw the meaning. And post-event, so because my body had been so brutally beaten, I had slipped into a coma. I was taken to the hospital. I was completely awake. I was just this vast consciousness. And I was seeing and hearing everything. And within that, I experienced, and it's very difficult to really put it into words. So please bear with me where, my description, it's as good as I can get. It's a summary description, but it was this experience, encounter of the entirety of lifetimes of the human journey, every lifetime, every human, and I experienced it in entirety. And as I was experiencing this, I was also witness and recognizing that the man soul who violated me had chosen in this lifetime, he wanted to reawaken to love. And this body soul had chosen, I wanted to embody and demonstrate absolute love. And so, boom, the two came together and intersected and actually provided that experience for each other. My presence and state of being catalyzed an awakening in that man, and he woke up to love and he realized the love. In the middle of that event, he stopped. He went, my God, I've killed an angel. What have I done? Please save her. He dropped to his knees. He picked me up to save me. He woke up to love. I, in the middle of that event, saw that soul, that man, was so disconnected and broken from love that all I could do was feel this infinite, immense love for him. And I prayed that he could know, realize, awaken, realize that he was love, he is lovable. So I became the absolute embodiment of love and demonstrated that. So we are all here serving a purpose and experience for each other. So when you are experiencing trauma, if you cannot come into contact with its purpose and its greater meaning, in other words, how does it help you grow? Or how does it help another grow? If you can't reach that point of meaning, you can't reconcile with it. And so your life and your situation, emotionally, psychologically, you keep coming back to it as a reference point until you do make sense of it. Not everyone gets to do that in one lifetime. Sometimes it takes us a few. But if we have just that piece of information, it serves us. It goes a long, long way to helping us with our healing process. Because it's not about so much then justifying the emotional impact of the experience, but rather, what do I need to learn from it? And I know that can sound terrible because, like, as a child, you know, I was sexually abused as a child, and any other person would say, well, how can you possibly say there was something for you to learn from that as a child? All I can tell you is now as an adult, and I look at my whole life, I realize how much I have gained from every single experience, and that it serves me to hopefully embody and be an example of unconditional love, of compassion, that I can look at all of my brothers and sisters with the eyes of being both perpetrator and victim, and understanding where that all comes from so that we can heal together. That's what I hope for. And above and beyond that, that when we do reconcile and we find meaning, we experience something incredibly transcendent. So when I was in the hospital bed and I had all of those insights and experiences, I realized, oh, that's it. I haven't finished what I came here for. And I slipped back into the body. The body healed miraculously. What I realized was every single thing we are experiencing is about love. There's nothing else going on this planet. It's all about love, whether we are whole and connected in it or we're disconnected. And that determines whether we're victim or perpetrator, or we keep in that loop of all of that cycle. It's all about love, reawakening to love and expressing and giving and imparting love and creating a world of greater love. And I lay there knowing what I am, consciousness, energy, life, is infinite, unborn, undying, eternal, untouched, unbroken. No matter what happens to me, I remain. That is the truth of all of us. We are that. Do we undergo tragic experiences? Yes. Sometimes that's the end. We depart. We leave this particular incarnation and we continue on as life force. Sometimes we continue on and we grow beyond it and we heal and we discover that we've become stronger and more powerful as a result of it. There are many different routes, but ultimately they are all pathways within the infinite eternal self. This is just a garment, a suit. Every experience comes and goes. Nothing is permanent. But the life force, the consciousness, the love that we are remains indestructible and ever present.
Wow, thank you so much, Isira. That is just very profound. And it reminds me of especially something you've said, which is the truth as well, that love is the inclusion of all energy. that's it. And just what you're speaking about is exactly that. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Now there's a comment here as well about it's from Hanumani. And she just says, the Dalai Lama is the person who has been the most public example of kindness, compassion, gentleness, forgiveness. And so to take him down is the ultimate blow to the notion of goodness and humanity,
Mm-hmm.
to make everyone doubt what they thought they knew,
Mm-hmm.
those who they thought they could trust.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And even if we look at it from that perspective, this is another example of what is happening in the world, that there are events that are manipulating, and this is not conspiracy. This is fact, that these devices we're on right now, the platforms we're using, are deliberately designed with psychological skill and expertise to polarize us, to confuse us, to gaslight us, to maintain control. And most of us don't even realize how much we are being manipulated. And if we take the position of innocence, and that comment from Hanumani, it really does represent a very, very sad moment for humanity. It really does. And I already spoke a bit to that, that the reason it has created such a stir, and it's not just going away or, settling down easily, is because the Dalai Lama has embodied, enacted, and represented kindness, compassion, forgiveness for decades upon decades. And so he has represented that archetype, whether everyone agrees with it or not. I'm talking at large. He has represented that archetype for humanity. And that is very sad that has been disrupted.
Oh, yeah. Well, thank you, Isira, again.
Yeah, thank you.
There's a couple of comments also coming in of appreciation, saying, so yeah, beautiful. There's a comment saying from Vinavani, thank you for speaking of the nuance of life nowadays and how important discernment is. Your words speak to my soul as deep truth.
Thank you.
And a couple of heart messages, and then one also saying, I just want to say thank you so much. I've been deeply moved by your talk.
Thank you. I think we have
another
another question.
Yeah, there is another question. You're right. Let me just read that. From Tenzin. I'm writing this not as Dalai Lama's follower, but I'm asking this as another human being who have a heart to feel and brain to think. Thank you so much for this enlightening on this. This time I have noticed that many many social media influences is taken away by power and money. And also, none of them ever talk about the hardship, the Dalai Lama and his contribution towards humanity. Why are they not? They're talking. Why they are not talking about the youngest political prisoner, Panchen Lama? What is your opinion on this? After all, love is the answer. Does that make sense? Sorry, it was a bit.
Yeah. I agree. I understand, Tenzin, that oftentimes events are created to suck everyone's attention in to a particular event and direct everyone's attention or perception in a certain way. And that there is an agenda behind that very often. And so when we then look at, okay, there's been not much attention given to pension, or what's the, can you read the name again?
Yes, it was Panchen,
Yeah, pension, yeah. We know that there's so much control going on to protect the already existing controlling powers, and that the system is designed to protect itself. And so the social media platforms have posed both a threat and an opportunity. One, the threat in that it cannot be completely controlled, that every single human on the planet can access it and can import content and information into it. Number two being the opportunity that it can be controlled and manipulated still. So it's that sounds contradictory, but both those facets are co-occurring. And it's been proven again and again and again that you know, social media and specific sectors of our human obsessions are used to manipulate, including materialism, capitalism, obsession with economic power and gain, obsession with policies, etc., etc. We just see largely, and please just don't take my word for it. You do your own observations and exploring and investigating or whatever, but there is a lot of information that exposes this fact. We're being manipulated. A lot of what is happening is manipulation so that the existing systems of power can basically be maintained instead of being disrupted. And the easiest way to do that with human beings is invoke fear. So trigger off the fear response, create confusion, create division and polarization. You put those three together and you have the master power for manipulation. And that's what's going on in the world. Look at the number of events that were driven by sparking off, provoking fear, creating confusion, and polarizing. Take a look at social media. Take a look at the news outlets. Take a look at most of what we're being fed. So on the one hand, there's great benefit. Look, here we are. We're able to have this time together and share and contemplate and open ourselves. Wonderful. And we would be best to use this type of medium very, very carefully. Very carefully. And so on that note, I really do want to encourage you all to contemplate this further and to really look at how easily we have all been manipulated on many occasions. And I think this particular event is an example of manipulation, that our emotions and our perceptions and interpretations are being very much tinkered with. And there are agendas. So I'll just come back to what can we do about it? Be here with ourselves. Be as present as we can be with and within ourselves. From conscious awareness, to address as much of the, you know, the conditioned framework that we've got. Of course, some of that's still going to drive us, you know, we're kind of looking through these lenses we've collected along the way, but the lenses are not us. We can take them off. And the way we take them off is to come back into stillness, back into awareness, and that will guide us for healing, peace, truth. It will also guide us into better awareness and better relations with each other. And maybe it's time for us to step back into the smallness of that, and that within that smallness is real greatness, is real grace, love, and wellness. So, Seisha, I would say we've probably been at it for a while. Unless there's another question or any other comments, I might want to do just a little closing.
Thank you, Isira. Yes, thank you for all you shared, and yeah, a closing is good. Thank you.
So once again, thank you everyone for joining in. It's a great honor and blessing to be able to share with you, and as small as it might seem, it's valuable that you've taken the time to open your own heart and mind even more, and to grow with that further in your own life. And for us to be aware that when we're connecting in this intention that is about rooting ourselves in loving awareness, and that we want to step back from wanting to make immediate judgments, when we come back in rooted in awareness and love, that energy is helping heal ourselves, each other, and the planet. And we need more of this. So I thank you all deeply for your presence and your part, for your love, for your awareness, and for growing that light in the world. Let's keep awakening together, and I look forward to sharing with you again. Great love and gratitude. Namaste.